Well, good morning. Welcome to B Cube Sunday morning. We're opening up a little late because we got just shy of telling Aggie jokes, and you know how that can get when you start telling Aggie jokes. But we have a Texas fella here. But this is B Cube Sunday morning with Tom Whitmore and his friends. Now, Tom, I'm going to say good morning. We're happy to have you all here. And then I'm going to say goodbye while you introduce your friends.
Sounds good to me. Um, Welcome. We're going to be talking this morning about movies, particularly the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and current politics, and we'll see where the conversation happens to go. I have two old friends from Seattle here, Nick Fraser and Hank Graham. Both of them have very similar biographies in terms of what goes on here, but different backgrounds. They're incredible movie buffs, and they really are interested in what's going on in the world of politics these days. And I figured, love to have them talk about this and see what we can come up with. Nick, would you like to say a few words about yourself?
Yeah, my name is Nick Fraser. I was born and raised in Los Angeles, and so I come from the company town. I big on science fiction movies, film noir, stuff like that. Yeah, I'm sure more will come out in conversation.
Yes. Hank?
I am Hank Graham. I grew up in Houston, Texas. My dad did not believe in TV, so we did not have one. And when I was 15, I had seen in my life entirely about 20 movies. And then I moved out when I was 15. And the words of my brother, I've made up for lost time like you would not believe.
So one of the interesting things about Marvel, the Marvel Comics universe back in the 60s, was that they started bringing in contemporary events a little bit, which DC had done a lot less of, other than World War II, which everybody dealt with. And I'm sort of interested in the ways in which Marvel reflects and shows us what's going on in the current political scene with just a little bit of time added. Is this of interest to either of you?
Yeah, if we're talking movies, first of all, let me unpack my bona fides or lack thereof. I am not a hardcore Marvel person from back in the day. Partly this is generational, partly this is by choice. It was later on that I became familiar with the whole X-Men thing, and my God, that's a whole thing in and of itself. If you wish to comment upon the state of the drift of current politics, the X-Men would have been a great place to do it, but for reasons that have nothing to do with politics, X-Men stuff sort of drew a halt some time ago. So that would have been better, I'm thinking, for that. Unfortunately, a lot of the political aspects of Marvel movies get bogged down in the weeds of toxic fanboyism, as much as any political statement, at least in my perception.
So we can, I hope, pull out the toxic fanboyism and make things more visible. Hank?
Well, actually, Nick put his finger right on something I was going to mention, is that the movies themselves, the subjects they deal with are only indirectly about politics, but the arguments about the movies, everybody's aware, you have a whole bunch of right-wing commentators who are really upset because, oh my God, we've had Marvel movies with, female characters, and we're going to get, female cooties on us by watching them. And it's very regrettable because there's, yes, I'm one of those people that I have this arrangement with Marvel. They release a movie, I give them money and watch it. And in the case of something like Madam Web, I want my time back. But then you get something like She-Hulk, which was delightful. And there were all these absolutely horrifyingly terrible reviews of it, because there were a whole bunch of fanboys who were upset because, my God, they're making something with a female protagonist. And that unfortunately does reflect our times. We seem to have a whole bunch of incels out there who are caught up in things. They're disappointed in life and they're taking it out on our movies. So,
which, to be fair to the property of She-Hulk, is ridiculous because it always was about a female character.
yeah.
It makes no sense at all that people would get upset that, oh my God, She-Hulk is female. It's in the name, guys.
Yeah. It also, it was like the number of people who are like, I heard it was terrible. It was absolutely a delight. I mean, partly they had good scripts. They had a real great approach to the sense of humor that was the She-Hulk comics, and they had Tatiana Maslany, with whom it is very hard to go wrong.
Yeah,
as opposed to Madam Web, I don't know what happened with that.
I cannot say anything for Madam Web. I would also hasten to point out Madam Web is from the Sony thing,
yeah,
not from the MCU canonic,
the Marvel Comics universe.
What the hell that means. But the thing with She-Hulk is, I think a lot of people were hoping for a superhero series to be one thing, and one of the good things that the MCU, both in streaming and the theaters, have done is they've managed to contain multitudes. They've done different types of films within their vast properties that they've had. And She-Hulk was basically an early 2000s sitcom, which I'm completely okay with for all the reasons that Hank mentioned. It was a joy for that. I think one of the reasons the incel fanboys got mad at is they were specifically being made fun of in She-Hulk.
Which is a good thing, in my opinion. Make fun of incels, hit Nazis,
Yes, well, and Marvel has been hitting the Nazis since the 40s.
Yeah, so. But the other thing about you really have to pay attention to, politics work their way into the MCU always indirectly. It's all about, I mean, they don't directly address political issues, but by the color of the fantasies that they're talking about, they express the wish people have, gee, I wish this had happened this way. I wish that had happened that way. Mm-hmm. The great example is Black Panther, which they dragged their feet on making for like 8 or 9 years because they weren't really sure that a movie with a black superhero would do well. And it turned out, yeah, there was a huge audience waiting to see that movie, wanting to see that movie. But they're not approaching the politics directly. They're not, giving political analysis or political speeches or anything really political aside from, hey, what if there was a place in Africa that did not just get abused by the colonizers and ran their own show? So it's indirect.
I went to see Black Panther opening weekend. That just coincidentally happened. The show my friends and I went to had a lot of black groups there, like from churches and stuff like that. And the audience energy was amazing.
I'll bet.
It was quite the thing to behold. I would mention another great political moment that they had that is not about anything specific, is at the beginning of, I believe it's Winter Soldier, when Nick Fury trots out this great surveillance thing that he's come up with, and he runs it by Captain America. He says, "This is not about freedom. This is about surveillance and control. This is bad." Mm-hmm. And of course, Cap is a wonderful litmus test for what's moral in the MCU. So,
well, yeah, he has the analogous position in the DC universe. It's Superman and Batman, and Superman is the ideal, but Batman is the dark, pragmatic. What do we need to get things done? Yeah. And in the Marvel universe, the Superman, the sort of ideal, the model is Captain America, and the more pragmatic, what do we need to get by right now, is always Tony Stark. So
yeah. Well, not always, because Nick Fury is pretty pragmatic.
Yeah.
I get the feeling no one completely trusts Fury, probably with good reason.
Yeah, which is why they left him out of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Pretty much.
Well, he shows up occasionally, but yeah.
Yeah. But, you trust Coulson a lot more than you trust Fury.
Yeah, Coulson's a lot cuddlier.
That's true. I had my problems though with Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. One of the things comic books do that drives me batty. I mean, Agent Coulson in the first Avengers movie, he died.
Yeah.
And then of course they brought him back, and it isn't just that when they got into Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and they finally explained that, the explanation was one of the most ridiculous rubber science things I've ever seen in a lifetime of reading science fiction and fantasy. It was just always finding a way out of even when people dying. That's one of my difficulties with comic books. So.
And they don't do it that often in the cinematic universe.
Yes, good. I was one of those people who saw, I forget which is it Ultron where you have Thanos does the snap?
No, that's the end of Infinity War.
Infinity War.
Yeah.
I actually left the theater rather disappointed because I knew he just destroyed half the universe, and I knew in the nature of comic books, all of those deaths didn't matter because they were going to find some way to undo them.
What I found amusing was the number of people who thought they were gone, who were not familiar with the concept of comic book death, which is its own,
Yes.
Yes, I said, my friend, you realize they're not going to stay dead, right? And now the challenge for the movie maker is bringing them back in such a way that audiences will accept,
rather than just
Which
Well,
thrown out.
I was actually rather disappointed because I knew it was going to be comic book deaths that did not matter. Yeah. And yet at the same time, then I go to Avengers Endgame, and I loved it.
Yes. They managed to craft a good story to get you back to that point, and everyone gets emotional when the portals start opening up, and everybody.
Man, I would have gone just to see the Captain America Avengers Assemble moment. So.
Mm-hmm. Have you seen the political version of that with all the Democrats' faces imposed over the heroes and
no?
Being...
there have been several.
Yes, Trump as Thanos.
Yeah,
it's very well done, and it's the inspiration for me doing this.
Ah, okay. Well, right now we're in we are in interesting political times, and I wonder how that's going to work its way into into the various fantasies. But that thought doesn't really go anywhere. Just to
Well, it's an interesting question as to whether it will. As you said, politics doesn't work its way into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the ways we think. It's never really strongly visible. Well,
have you ever read Michael Kammen's book, Mystic Chords of Memory?
No.
It is, of the last 20 years, it's one of the most magisterial books of history you can encounter. He wrote, it's all about how, so that we Americans have a common ground to deal with, we depoliticize our history. And he studied it at tremendous length and great granular detail. And there are a few historians who are trying to argue about it, but he backed it up so well. It's, the book came out 15, 20 years ago now, and people are still in history. They're still dealing with the thought. He backed it up so thoroughly. It was apparently a book he'd been working on for about, in between his other histories, he worked on it for about 30 years before he finally published it. And I think that the Marvel Universe is a little bit like that. It's like, what can we do to talk about our culture and depoliticize it, to take the problems out of it and get to the things that we agree on. So,
And yet,
read obscure history books.
without things we disagree on, there's no story.
Yeah.
Without there being some disagreement. And science fiction, to a great extent, does that in general with our world of science and technology.
Well, as a tangent to this about the current state of affairs affecting fiction, one of the reasons Jordan Peele brought back the Twilight Zone, and you can argue how successful or not that was that he said, me and my friends feel like we're living in an episode of the Twilight Zone. And this is after the election of Donald Trump, which of course circles back to the original Twilight Zone, where Rod Serling said, I could talk about things that I couldn't talk about directly in the Twilight Zone. Because people would not talk. They didn't want to talk about what happened to Emmett Till. They didn't want to talk about actual political issues. But if I framed it with other types of imaginary things in the Twilight Zone, I could talk about those things.
Mm-hmm. It's a Good Life being about fascism, basically.
Yeah.
Well, they have the Twilight Zone had the episode with Dennis Hopper, who is, he has this mentor who he never sees until the end, who's training him how to be a successful politician. And it turns out to be, it's like the ghost of Adolf Hitler. And you watch that episode now, and the number of things he does that are directly what Donald Trump is doing, including there's a line in it about, don't worry about the truth. Just say it again and again. And, obviously we look at that a little differently now, having had the experience of a president who, hello, he lied, Mm-hmm. So, yeah, the Twilight Zone was very much about that. I think there is a little bit of that in the Marvel Universe. It'll be interesting to see how much of it if you've seen the trailer for the next Captain America movie, and the job has been taken over by a black guy. Yeah. And I think it's going to be a lot like Captain America Civil War. I think it's going to reflect more upon the various polarization problems that we've been having as a country. And I think they're setting it up for that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there is a reflection of what is going on. As I say, it doesn't address politics directly, but indirectly, there's a lot going on there.
Yeah. Well, as one of the commenters said, messy freedom and actual democracy don't translate well into bumper sticker politics. And one of the things about the Marvel Universe is that it doesn't really go for bumper stickers. It puts a little bit more complexity into it.
Actually, what I got a kick out of is, oh God, I can't remember the writer who pointed it out. He said the best Marvel movies are the ones in which, when you listen to the villain, you realize the villain has a point. Mm-hmm. So you get like Killmonger in Black Panther. You get the fella who sets them against each other in Civil War. Mm-hmm. Turns out he's from a country that was just, there was a superhero battle, and his entire country got pretty much destroyed, and his family got killed in the fighting. Mm-hmm. And him setting the Avengers against each other was the only way he could get revenge for what they had spread in his country, the damage they had spread to his country.
Well, I would push back on that just a little bit as a counterexample.
Sure.
With the High Evolutionary in the last Guardians of the Galaxy movie, where he's trying to make everything perfect for everybody. And if you've ever seen that movie, it's by turns hilarious and agonizing. But Rocket just says to him, no, you didn't. You just hated the way things were and you wanted to make people miserable. And I'm thinking, who does that remind me of? So yeah, that was and it isn't one of those things where you go, maybe he's right. No, he's nuts.
Well, Thanos has, in the Avengers, definitely has a point about overpopulation.
But people also point out, if you have this snapshot capacity, why don't you just increase the amount of resources if you can do that, rather than kill half the living people in the universe?
Yes, well, because he's nuts.
Yeah, they actually have in the animated series, the What If series. If, for those of you not familiar with What If, it's a bunch of alternate realities to the sacred timeline of the MCU. And in one of these, instead of Peter Quill becoming Star-Lord, it's T'Challa. It's the Black Panther, and he makes things wonderful out in the stars. He manages to talk Thanos away from mass homicide, and to increase resources and stuff like that. So yeah, Thanos has a point about overpopulation, but his solution is beyond brutal.
Yeah. I wonder to what extent the people who do things that are beyond brutal here, many of them, I think, have motivations that they think are good. I don't think Trump thinks he's a villain.
I don't think Trump cares. So I think the better example would be Netanyahu.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Netanyahu continues. He's doing attacks that are, I think, whether he's consciously doing it or not, he's doing attacks that is making it impossible to have a peace settlement. I don't think he wants one. I think he wants to keep the battle going, and he wants, a world where all of his enemies are completely and utterly destroyed. So he doesn't want to jump into any sort of peace solution, and he keeps killing key people that will make it impossible to make a settlement. That's not Trump. Trump is a different kettle of authoritarian assholes.
Trump is quite happy to have some people think he's the villain, but he's also deeply, deeply in need of worshipers, which does not make him Thanos. What does Thanos do after he kills half the universe? He becomes a farmer.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to set up a cult of personality around himself. That's just how it is for him. So in some ways, he does have this sort of horribly villainous integrity. Okay, and Liam Westcott had a question.
Yeah, I've been waiting for the question to appear, and it just has.
When the history of this time is written down, how much will future historians regard the role of art in reflecting what's going on in our country now and how that role influenced our culture? I think they will always look for stuff like that. And I'm going to give you another sideways example. Film noir. People will always point out, well, what film noir is representing is the returning veteran not knowing his place in society. And look, women had taken the job. So what's the place of men versus women? And also, how do we fit in a world that may not be as black and white moral as it was during the war? And the now lack of idealism in dealing with daily life. So how future historians look at it. So one of the things that we keep getting review bombed about for Marvel stuff has to do with what is being waved around right now for it's a DEI thing. It's a DEI hire. And it was not a really good fit for the Marvel Universe. But look at the rainbow, to use a terribly overused example, of people that are in the Eternals. A lot of people said, oh my God, look at all these not white people that are in this. Like, there are a lot of not white people in the universe, right? And them go see movies. So that's also a conscious business decision, because let's not forget, Disney is a business run for a profit. And and
So is Marvel.
well, but Disney owns Marvel, so it really doesn't matter.
But Marvel comes out of something that wasn't Disney.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you've seen the 1950s Mad magazine interview with Walt Disney, and he keeps opening, talking about it. This is my first drawing of Mickey Mouse, and he opens the drawer, and oh no, this is the first $20 I earned from it, and he holds up the $20 bill, yeah, and he knows the serial number of the bill.
Yeah.
it was 1950s classic Mad, where it was it was all about Disney, it was all about the money.
So the tragedy of this has become the diversity in the cast has become a political issue in and of itself.
Something to point out on this subject. One of my best friends, you know him, Tom, Kurt Buff, is a security professional, very high level. This is a guy who was into computer security and worrying about it before any of us were. So he pays a lot of attention to what is going on as far as, computer security and hacking. And because of Kurt, I'm aware of something that a lot of people aren't. Do you remember before there was the female Ghostbusters movie? I know this isn't Marvel. Bear with me. Before it came out, there were a tremendous number of negative reviews before anybody'd seen the movie.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
They know without a doubt that at least 98% of those reviews, it was Russian hacker organizations. They were trying to see if they could plant a story in social media, and it was a test run. They were seeing how much could they get other people posting it, and it was so successful they literally didn't believe their own results. But they chose this movie to attack as just an example. Can we create a social media story that didn't exist? And they found they were able to do it. The downside of that is that it was a dry run. The big one is that you got into the 2016 election, and they used that capability to put out a lot of nonsense about Hillary Clinton and pro stuff for Donald Trump. But it started out with, crazy ass reviews from people who hadn't even seen the movie. And unfortunately, the idea that you could, let's go attack a movie because we don't like it for some other reason, like Ghostbusters all female, I'm against it. And, and we've been seeing this, the guy who led the campaign to create negative reviews of She-Hulk, he said one of the things that inspired him was the reaction against, Ghostbusters, the female Ghostbusters. He wanted, let's trash this thing. And because he was upset that Marvel was wasting time on a female character.
And the one that got review bombed, I thought very unfairly, was The Marvels.
I gather it did too. I don't understand why there was so much hatred for the dang thing. I thought it was just sort of, the movie itself, kind of forgettable. It
was charming. I liked it. But I think it's, oh my God, 3 girls, and only one of them is white. I think that was the problem right there. If Hank, you go to the movie and you don't much care for it, fine. At least you've given it a shot. You've given it an honest opinion of it.
Well, I also close my mouth if I see something that I don't like. But all my friends are, oh my God, that's great. I'll keep my mouth shut. What is the word about, don't yuck somebody's yum? If somebody likes it, okay. Wasn't for me, but if you like it, I'm going to keep my mouth shut.
The running joke I have whenever I'm at cons and stuff like that about, I hate that question is like, what's the best movie? What's the worst movie? Like this movie was terrible. Look, if for you, the best movie of the year was Madam Web, then that was your best movie of the year. I will not agree with you, but I'm glad you saw something you enjoyed.
Yeah.
But but I always liked their take on Carol Danvers. I thought it was fine. I thoroughly enjoyed Ms. Marvel, so it was good to see her on the big screen. I thought it was nice. I frankly liked Nick Fury in this way better than the Nick Fury series, which is one of the ones I will say I did not really much care for that. But that was but the point, my point, and I do have one, was that was the last one I can recall that was really seriously review bombed by people who clearly could not have seen the movie, and it's because girls.
Well, yeah, but we also, for a variety of reasons, we now have a world where you get some disgruntled fans, and rather than just say, well, I don't like it, you get this, let's create a campaign against it, and that's kind of crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, hey, if somebody else is liking it, shut your mouth. What the fuck?
And Crunchyroll just went from a situation where they had lots of reviews on lots of things, many of which were done before the shows came out and were negative, and people were saying, why is this happening? And all that, to completely turning off reviews.
Yeah.
So there's now no sense of community that can be built there. Whereas before, there was a chance for people to build community. They said they did it to protect the community.
Well, we have it in science fiction with the whole, the sad puppy incidents, where a whole bunch of guys basically got upset because it wasn't the sort of science fiction they wanted to read, and they wanted everybody to change what they were doing to match their desires. So,
but that's in some ways the way democracy politics works. If you can convince enough people that it should be the way I think it should be, if I can convince enough people
actually
the way I think it should be, then we do get to change things.
I'm gonna draw a line there, though, Tom. Okay, that's fine when you're talking about public policy. Okay, but when you're talking about artistic expression, I don't really think that's a great way of getting movies made. There will always be, because studios are inherently conservative, small c, for economic reasons. Big budget movies will not push the envelope too much.
Mm-hmm.
But I think making a movie only with consensus of the fans, and it's usually the loudest fans in mind, to have something made, I don't think is a way you should have art by committee done. So yeah, I'm not entirely comfortable with that idea.
I'm not comfortable with it either. I don't think it works, but I was pointing it out as the way people do approach the world.
Yeah.
Well, I actually have somebody else is restoring a 60-year Triumph.
Well, that's the triumph of the will.
Mine is the triumph of the bike.
Yes.
No. Oh boy. I had a place I was going about artistic things. The Marvel Cinematic Universe, I mean, something that gets ignored because they use different directors, they use different writers, but it is the expression of a controlling mind, Kevin Feige. And one of the things I love about Kevin Feige, I mean, you have, this young, incredibly talented filmmaker who makes a film for very little money that nobody sees, and yet all the critics go, wow, that's great. And Kevin Feige is, why don't we play this guy millions of dollars and make him, let him make a real big movie? And it's within the MCU. But that's where we got, the Russo brothers, the fellow who did Fruitvale Station, who did Black Panther.
Yes.
But the controlling, it is, the work of art is an art coming from basically a producer. And that's something I don't think has been analyzed very much. And it's basically Kevin Feige who is trying to weave a world of all the superheroes. And I think that is really, he is the controlling artist for this universe.
Well,
In the same way that Stan Lee was for the original Marvel universe.
Well, so Stan Lee and Jack Kirby working as a partnership. I think Feige's doing the same thing.
I remember when they started with this, and they got Robert Downey Jr. to play Tony Stark. It's like, oh, they're going to have an actual alcoholic playing an alcoholic. Okay, now you have my interest. And then they were going to build on that to create the Avengers. And I thought, I'm sorry. I thought Thor was silly when I was a kid. But they went with Shakespearean director, so he knows stories. And they're all aliens now, so okay, I can kind of deal with that. And I didn't think Captain America would work because we're too damn cynical. Oh, they have Joe Johnston, who has the 1940s in his veins. So so he knows how to weave together the created reality of that time into okay, so that was good. Okay, this might actually work, because I was absolutely convinced they were going to crash and burn on either Thor or Captain America. But
I agree with you on Thor. Thor was always, when I was a kid and saw Thor comics, I thought that was a bit silly.
Yeah.
And, and I thought Captain America, like you, it is Captain America. If you read those first ones, they are so completely uncynical.
Yeah.
And how in the hell are they going to, wedge that into our modern world?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, yeah, how does somebody who is completely uncynical fit into our modern world? They played that subtext. They put that in there. And I thought Chris Evans was brilliant at, he can play that, goody two-shoes character and make him both likable and believable at the same time.
And
Elson's got the, he looks like Captain America.
and they did a good job. As you mentioned, they had different directors do different things. The Ant-Man movie were all heist movies. The most of the Captain America movies were some flavor of political thriller, right down to having Robert Redford be in it.
Yeah, I like that touch.
They managed to with Tony Stark, it's very much a techno thriller because it's Tony Stark. And they managed to weave those together and respect. They went for like 22 movies with not much of a bomb, certainly not much of a commercial bomb in there anywhere. Now, I hesitate to use the word commercial bomb because Hollywood loves to reconfigure the numbers to blame something they didn't like and saying, oh, it only made $5 more than what it cost to make. It's a bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Back in the day, that was not a bomb, guys.
I think the only one that you can truly make the claim that, yes, any way you look at it, that one was a bomb, was Madam Web, because
again,
for some reason, it was incredibly expensive to make. It had like a $225 million budget to make it, and you do not see that on the screen. It is
again two things. I'm talking up to Endgame, first of all.
Okay, fair enough.
And second, I would rather leave Madam Web off to the side, because again, that's the last gasp of Sony's death grip on the Spider-Man characters.
Yeah.
And I don't think they're going to be making any more, frankly, after that. I did not see it. I had a friend of mine who did see it.
I can't say I'm upset by that.
I had a friend of mine who did see it. He's also the guy who went to go see Cats on New Year's Eve. And he saw Madam Web, and he said, that's a really, really bad movie, and I respect his judgment on that, and I have really not felt the deep need to go see it myself, even though it's on Netflix now.
Well, one of the other things, the effect of people deciding they dislike a movie without seeing it, as you point out, we don't have criticism. So I went and saw Madam Web because, I'm hearing terrible stuff about it, and that means nothing, because I've seen these ginned up controversies, and like for She-Hulk, which I loved.
Mm-hmm.
I kept hearing, oh, it's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. and I laughed my head off. What the heck?
And there are times when I just decide, okay, I want to see how bad can be.
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things I've done is we had a bad movie series that we did for Seattle Movie Geeks, a group that is sort of going into hibernation. And people will say, "Oh, what's the worst movie I ever saw? Madam Web's like, let me introduce you to Thor Johnson."
Have you seen Star Crash?
Oh yes, I have, and that's bad. My floor for bad is much deeper than a lot of people.
Yeah.
But
I feel you, brother.
yeah. So the thing with this is I will go see things. I won't say anything bad about a movie I have not seen. There are some movies I just have no desire to go see. It just doesn't pique my interest. I did go see the female Ghostbusters. I enjoyed it. I thought it was charming. I like the women. Now, my biggest problem was I'm not big on the beats for the comic writer who wrote it. Unfortunately, Hank planted Feig's name in my head, and I keep wanting to say that, and that's not who I mean. But he's also the guy who wrote not Wedding Crashers, but Bridesmaids, and stuff like that. Who many of the same actors are in that too. And I'm just not a fan of his comic beats. I had no problem with the actresses, if that's not a completely anachronistic term these days. But for the young woman who played Helmholtz, who was also in Barbie, I love her. She throws herself at everything. So she was a joy to watch.
Because I grew up without television, I don't watch a lot of television. I watch movies all the time, but I watch a TV show and it does something stupid, I stop watching it. So I don't see a lot of television. So one of the things I thought was great about the female Ghostbusters, there's this actress that just saying hello, she made me laugh. And it was Kate McKinnon. I had not seen her before that moment. I hadn't watched Saturday Night Live. And she was just, that woman could make me laugh doing anything, I got on YouTube to watch a whole bunch of her stuff because I hadn't seen her.
I believe that's who I mean. Tom can back me up on this.
I am terrible with names, so I'm not the one to ask for that. But I was just thinking about something that Karen and I just watched, which got a lot of negative reviews, which was the TV series The Watch, based on Terry Pratchett. It is, we can see, we were talking about how we could see how and why it got negative reviews from people who like Pratchett, but it's actually very true to Pratchett in a whole lot of ways. It makes Ankh-Morpork much less medieval and much more punkish. But the characters are much less heroic than they end up becoming in Pratchett, but they're much more like the characters as they start out. Terribly flawed, but having something good to come from them. And it's something that I think, the whole question of how do you feel about something that you haven't seen? Often sort of but sometimes you're wrong.
Well, I have to say, I think you're being extraordinarily generous to it. To me, it's a masterclass in, Terry Pratchett really knew how to tell a joke.
Yeah.
Decide to make a comedy and throw out his humor and try to substitute your own. I can see why the fans did not like it, and I certainly joined them in that. But they had golden material and they threw it away. The stuff that they had, I did not think, made up for it. I did not think they wrote comedy nearly as well as Terry Pratchett. At a certain moment, I did have a moment of, yeah, that's how the character was in the book. Pity they took away the funny lines, Yeah,
they definitely treated the comedy differently.
I don't join you on that one. I think that it was pretty much a misbegotten mess, and I did not care for it.
I saw only the pilot, and I'm not a Terry Pratchett super fan, so
I am.
I know. So I'm removing.
So is Karen.
Yeah,
So,
I'm removing myself from the controversy. I will say that yes, Kate McKinnon is exactly who I meant, who was playing Helmholtz. She throws herself into everything. She's weird Barbie in Barbie.
Yes.
She has a hilarious role, essentially as the devil in a little fantasy called Yesterday.
Yes.
So yeah, it was a joy to see.
After seeing the Ghostbusters, I got on YouTube and went looking for, and I saw a whole bunch of her stuff on Saturday Night Live. And the woman is amazing. So, talking about people who know how to play comedy. So, go ahead.
So to bring it back to the MCU, my feelings about politics in the MCU are far more about the ideas of diversity and inclusion than any specific critique on actual political events that are happening. And I want to get back to Liam's statement about how people will look at that. Although someone has sent me a secret message to talk more about Yesterday. In case you haven't seen it, it is a movie about a guy who has a strange bus accident, wakes up, and is the only man who can remember the Beatles. Now, luckily, he's a singer-songwriter himself. So he starts busking Beatles songs and becomes a music superstar overnight. And of course, it tears at him because these aren't his songs. But the voice of the devil is played by Kate McKinnon, who wants to take him all the way to the top as a manager. And it's also a love story in there too, and it's quite charming.
It's one of those films that I wanted to see but haven't.
Oh, you should. Unfortunately, I think they took it down off Netflix.
Oh, that's true.
But
there is also a thing.
Okay, here's the one thing I will proselytize for this audience. Tom, get thee to Scarecrow Video. Scarecrow Video still exists. For the rest of you across the country, scarecrowvideo.com. They will send you stuff in the mail. You remember what that's like? So stuff you can't stream, go find them.
And Scarecrow Video is the greatest video store ever of all time in the entire world, and we need to support it.
Yes.
Yes, I remember going. They used to do a movie night for things that weren't on video.
Yeah.
Which is
they still do.
Yeah. When they can find copies of the actual film version.
Yes.
And they're really good at finding stuff.
Yes.
Actually, I wrote an article for a journal about 6 months ago. Movies that people didn't know about that are gone. And it is kind of amazing. I've lived long enough and seen enough things that nobody remembers. I mean, were you aware that the magazine New Yorker, for a brief period of time, distributed movies? It only lasted about 12 years. And there was this incredibly brilliant cinematographer, Al Coutat. He did all the films for both Francois Truffaut and Jean-Luc Godard in the French New Wave. And the only film he ever directed, he made a film about the Vietnam War because his wife was Vietnamese, had moved to France. And you know, sometimes when I tell people about it, I'm wondering, did that really exist? Because you never meet anybody else who's ever even seen it or heard of it. You know, but it was this brilliant film. And in fact, I mentioned it, Nick, you'll like this. I mentioned it to the guy at Scarecrow looking for, they were going to have a non-video stuff. They could not even find a print of it in this country.
Yeah, there are some things that even Scarecrow can't find. But they've got thousands and thousands of titles of things they can find.
Yes.
Is it scarecrow.com or scarecrowvideo.com?
Oh, you got to ask me stuff like that when I'm on a computer.
You said Scarecrow Video, and Bob put up Scarecrow.
Yeah, let's.
That's why I want to disambiguate while we're here.
I'm going to attempt to disambiguate right now. Unfortunately, I can't use the computer I'm talking to you on.
Scarecrowvideo.org.
Scarecrowvideo.org. Thank you, Hank. You saved the day.
Yes, and let's make sure we get that
Yes.
the right thing up there in the comments, Bob.
Is there a way to type a message in the chat thing?
Scarecrow.com will probably be like a Four Seasons lawn care thing if we're not careful.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll send somebody to places in Nebraska or something like that. No shade on Nebraska, but you're not going to get videos from Scarecrow.com. My mistake. ScarecrowVideo.org. They recently recreated their search engine. You can actually do a search engine on online for stuff, and they won't send you everything in the mail, but they'll send you lots of stuff in the mail if you're in the continental United States. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you, Bob. The link
you, Bob.
to Scarecrow is now up in the chat.
Yes.
Yes.
So yeah, where I was going was that I think the main contribution to the political milieu, if I can use a fancy French word, has as much to do with stuff that frankly we shouldn't be that concerned with at our political office holder level than we are, having to do with making the culture less homogenized. Tragically, it has become something that electoral officials will use as a stick to beat the electorate with. But that that's that. So generally in the MCU, it's not like people have held a political position that was unpopular. It's just that, oh my God, look at all these faces that aren't white males. And I just kind of find that to be sad. That people find that objectionable in the year 2024, because that was always the case. I mean, again, bringing it back to it for the X-Men, it's like, if you don't understand the X-Men are all about bigotry and prejudice and how that's bad and intolerance, then you really weren't paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it helped that I know they're not part of the MCEU, but the X-Men, the first movies were basically directed and I think written as well by Bryan Singer, who is gay, and the thing that got him involved with it, somebody pitched it to him, and apparently he had not been a big comic book reader at all ever, but somebody passed him some of the really good X-Men episodes, and he realized it's all about people who are just marginalized, and he knew that very well. And that's what got him involved in wanting to make it.
So the X-Men have sort of been folded into the MCU with Deadpool and Wolverine.
Yeah.
And I will admit, and our sands are running down here, but I will just say, yes, Deadpool is a deeply problematic character. A lot of fun, but kind of a problem.
Actually, I would use my housemate Janice asked me a few weeks ago, how do I decide which movies I own versus which I don't? And the movies I own, they're movies I love. And I own Deadpool 1 and 2.
Okay.
And I will never own Deadpool 3.
Oh my goodness, what happened?
I enjoyed it. But the earlier movies had the human emotion about Deadpool dealing with his very screwed up life. The third movie, I enjoyed the living shit out of it, and it's all fan service. And I think that's a trap that you have, that they didn't have enough real human emotion in it as a movie. As much as I enjoyed it, I'm a comic book geek and a science fiction geek, and I know my Marvel, and it was a bit too much. There wasn't enough really human to emotionally bond me to it.
Okay. I will say this much. I watched again after seeing it, Logan, and of course that just tears your heart out, because that's just a heartbreaking movie. Which is tied into Deadpool Wolverine. Anyway, the sands are running out of our hourglass, apparently.
Yes, I'm sure we could talk for another hour entirely about these things, as we have done.
I think all three of us, when we die, they're going to have to put our tongues to death with a stick.
Yes. But Bob is here to start pushing BQ Press. Before we do that, let's do a quick last comments.
I was happy to talk to you guys. Remember, the politics doesn't always involve necessarily people on stage running for office, and I think that's something that we see reflected in the MCU. And if we're here to shill something, scarecrowvideo.org. Go forth, look it up. If you're in Seattle, come on down.
I've kind of said everything that I wanted to say. Also, a shout out to Scarecrow. They're having money problems. Please, it would be good if people would call, support them, rent movies from them, because they're this incredible resource that we in Seattle have been blessed with.
Yes.
And you don't need to be in Seattle to get the movies.
And they download. They have many things on DVD, and they have many things that are not available on DVD on VHS, and occasionally probably on beta.
And Laserdisc. Although
Laserdisc.
I gather their recent sale, they're sort of divesting Laserdiscs.
Oh, the Laserdisc people have come out in droves buying up the Laserdiscs. They've got a big sale on Laserdiscs.
Yeah, I was at the sidewalk sale too. Though after you, by the time I got there, you made a hell of a haul there.
All right. So let's hand it back over to Bob so we can talk about BQ Press. And I want to say,
wait a second, Tom. I can't talk about BQ Press yet because I had a random thought ran through my brain, and you've got the two people here that will probably look at me aghast with the question, didn't think about it, and grin and come up with a really amazing answer.
Then go for it.
I like Tim Walz. I think he is he looks just like our high school football coach back home, Coach Mitchell, who also had the world's largest spur collection, if that's any great thing. And but if Tim Walz were to be a comic book villain, which one would he be?
Wow.
See, now there, I made you think.
My imagination fails. I cannot imagine Tim Walz being a comic book villain. I can imagine it as J.D. Vance really easily for multiple villains. And that, to me, the most interesting part of this matchup is that if you wanted to create an evil version of Tim Walz, I think it could look a hell of a lot like J.D. Vance.
Tom Walz.
I have trouble with him going evil. I can't believe it.
Tim Walz would not be, Tim Walz would not be a villain. Tim Walz would be he would be some mad inventor who was doing something that was having a horrible side effect that he wasn't aware of.
There you go. I actually, when I thought about this, I picked Toyman.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
The toy maker or something like that. Yeah.
That's
and the reason, and you know what drove this? Because I looked at Tim Walz and said, oh my God, this guy's like my Uncle Scoopy. He's like my Coach Mitchell. He's like this, every person's got an uncle or a grandfather or somebody, a neighbor that he is the epitome of just niceness, goodness, that when you're faced with a dilemma, you say, what would so-and-so do? I could see myself asking the question when faced with a dilemma, what would Tim do?
Although I will say, in appearance, if anything, in the comic book oeuvre, he would look like the ventriloquist guy in Batman with the little puppet. Tim, I don't know the name offhand. Hank probably knows, but yeah,
not a villain I'm aware of.
It's a ventriloquist with a dummy that looks like a 1920s gangster caricature.
Okay.
And yeah, that's an obscure Batman villain, but there you go. But because the guy looks so completely ordinary.
The Batman I'm aware of is the Frank Miller ones, and a prediction for you. In the same way that Christopher Nolan took all the best bits out of all the Frank Miller stories and made his Batman movies, 10 or 20 years from now, we're going to find somebody who's going to trip over it and take a whole bunch of the Tom King Batman and Catwoman stories and move them into the movies.
Possible.
No, the Tom King stuff is terrific.
I think you guys are all wonderful to have on board, and I will just say, Yahoo about having a VP nomination and a presidential nomination, both of whom are so inspiring as to just the level of enthusiasm and hope is something beyond my wildest dreams. As somebody who BQ Press has made its mark with political fiction, be it our first book, Alternative Truths, where we took a look at the potentials of the Trump presidency. And oh my God, we weren't science fiction writers, we were prophets. And we have a book coming up that we're releasing probably within the month that Karen KG Anderson is working with us on. That's got some great writers in it. It's got Jim Wright. It's got David Gerald. It's got Adam Troy Castro. It's got Alan Shapiro. It's got KG Anderson. And I could go through the list of just even Cliff Winnig. We let Cliff in. He does our show next week. So you'll have to give him a hard time about it. But it's called Southern Truths. And there is Southerners have their own truths, the ones that they tell themselves and the ones that are true. And it's interesting when they overlap. So I look forward to getting that one out. And that said, I'll warn you of one book that will likely be coming. We're going to put out a call here in about a month for what's called Retribution and Revenge. And it's about the second presidency of Donald Trump. And or a Donald Trump-like character. Because I can honest to God say with great joy, I have never mentioned Trump's name on a cover. Oh, except once, but that was a specialty edition. And I don't intend to. But if you want to describe a second term from Donald Trump, Retribution and Revenge will probably be a good selection. And now go ahead.
Can I bring in a quick political story that I think people would appreciate? Because I think it's a good point to end on.
Do they have Trump in them?
No.
Oh,
Let's hear it, Hank.
Okay, I want people to remember this. In the 70s, the Supreme Court, we got Roe v. Wade, we got, Loving, we got all of the decisions that decided that, the equality of the people meant all of the people. But there was an exception from the 70s court. They had somebody who was homosexual who got arrested he was supposedly having, sex with his boyfriend, and he got arrested for it. And the Supreme Court did not, validate his rights. They said that homosexuality has been it's been a crime, and that this was not a protected class, and this was not a protected action. And that was in the 70s. And in basically one generation, a whole bunch of gay activists managed to get a court to recognize the right of gays to be married. It didn't happen because of what the Supreme Court did. It did because a whole bunch of people made a campaign to say, look, the court's wrong. That is not who we want to be. That is not how we want to live. We want to be a better nation. And they convinced people of it to the point that eventually the court itself recognized it. Now, right now, we're in a hole. We've got these, this partisan hack court that is doing anything it can to throw every right out the window. It isn't going to last, and all we have to do is work like, the people who campaigned for gay marriage did. We don't accept it. It's possible. We got to just, fight back against that crap. We can win.
Absolutely.
And I'll make a comment even briefer than that. When the Dobbs decision came down, I told my friends, okay, they got what they wanted, but they're not going to want what they get.
Yeah.
I'm a wee bit left of center, and I put my money this year. I bought 100 vote blue signs. That's all it says, vote blue. And then I built custom mounts for them, and I'm giving them out to all my friends in this wonderfully red city that I live in. Because
where do you live now, Bob? I don't know.
I live over in Richland, Washington.
Okay.
It is a place that has got a 2-to-1 Republican majority. It has got 5-to-1 of if you have a precinct committee officer selection, that you have 5 Republican PCOs for every Democratic PCO. When we held an election this year for PCO, there was only 1 Democrat on the ballot and 6 Republicans. Huh. It is dominated. And the reason I went with the vote blue is because I know there's a lot more Democrats than you would see out there. And I feel like a sign in your yard that says vote blue is giving permission to your neighbors to accept you, and giving and announcing to the world that you're not afraid to vote blue. Because what I found the most amazing thing in the local politics was a number of people who literally are in the Democratic Party leadership roles, who don't want to put a vote blue sign or a political candidate sign in their yard for fear their neighbors will know. And it's like, come on, guys. We got to be bold. We got to be proud. We got to let them look at us and say, well, if he's a Democrat or she's a Democrat, then it's not a bad thing to be a Democrat. And you know what? We're going to have to do what Jim Wright tells us to do. Vote. And vote. When it's your turn to vote, do it. Because a lot of people, when Hillary Clinton was running, thought it was a shoo-in and stayed home. And what we got was 4 years of hell, and now we're going to have a generation of a Supreme Court that thinks the president is king. And so, wait a second, I'm sorry. That was my soapbox. I can get off now. But thank you guys for coming. And keep reading, Chris. Say again, sir?
Thanks for having us.
Oh, you guys are a pleasure. I will look forward to having you again. And like I say, anytime you feel the urge that says, I really got something to talk about, I got about once a month, I got a show that I got to figure out what to put in. It's always good to have people who are engaging, who are intelligent, who understand the nuances of it, not just the headlines. And that's what it sounded like today. And so thank you, Tom. And thank you. Oh, my God, I'm forgetting names. I'm getting old.
Nick and Hank.
Nick and Hank. My God, it sounds like a early. You guys are names like that. Makes me wish J.D. Vance probably wishes he had names like that. That way he could come across as,
Well, he could he could just change his name again.
Well, he could, yeah. We could call him. Yeah, that would do it.
Yeah.
I just read an article about how he's trying to by his interest in Lord of the Rings and Magic the Gathering and stuff. He's trying to categorize himself as a nerd. And
Actually, I made a comment. He posted his love about Magic the Gathering and how it had adversely affected women's minds. And I posted in response to that, yes, he actually, said that out loud. But I posted that this is the sort of son of a bitch who was probably a rules lawyer. So,
However, this is a conversation we should have offline and not make the other people listen to it.
yeah.
oh, they can listen to it if they want, but let's let them go. And hey, thank you guys